Hello, very good afternoon to you. Theresa May is heading to Brussels to try to finalise her Brexit deal with other EU leaders. The Prime Minister is hoping the plans will be approved at a summit taking place on Sunday. But the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has threatened to derail the timetable if he doesn't get further reassurances over the status of Gibraltar. Here's our political correspondent Chris Mason.
Roll up, the Prime Minister doesn't quite say, but you get the picture. The government setting its stall out wherever you might hear, see or read it. But for this weekend at least, the focus turns away from here at Westminster, away from flogging the deal domestically, and the Prime Minister hops over the channel instead to ensure that the EU is fully signed up to it. Mrs May heads for Brussels later to meet two of the biggies of that city, the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and the European Council President, Donald Tusk. And then tomorrow it is showtime as European leaders gather for the big Brexit summit. But Spain wants more reassurance about the future of Gibraltar.
Y respecto a Gibraltar, les diré que...
Regarding Gibraltar, let me tell you, I insist that the guarantees are not enough, and therefore Spain maintains its veto on the Brexit deal.
And Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists who prop up Theresa May in Downing Street sound like they're threatening to pull the plug on that if the Prime Minister's plan is approved by MPs.
That agreement was about giving national stability, it was acting in the national interest and delivering on Brexit. If this is not going to deliver on Brexit, then of course that brings us back to the situation of looking at the confidence and supply agreement, but we're not there yet.
You might feel you've heard quite enough about Brexit, but it's about to get even louder still. Chris Mason, BBC News.
Well, even if the EU approves the Brexit deal, Mrs May must still persuade enough MPs to support it, which may prove difficult. Today, the Chancellor told Radio 4 that he believes the Brexit deal agreed by Mrs May is better than staying in the EU. Speaking on the Today programme, Philip Hammond said the deal on offer was the best way of Britain leaving the EU with the minimum negative impact on the economy.
The position is this: if we were to leave the European Union without a deal, I have no doubt that the consequences for the UK economy would be very serious indeed, very disruptive and very negative for jobs, for prosperity in the future. But this country has fundamental economic strengths, and if we can get a deal based on the agreement that we've reached with the European Union, then I'm equally confident that Britain has a very bright future ahead of it.
Philip Hammond speaking to John Humphreys on the Today programme this morning. So what's in Theresa May's plan for Brexit? Well, her proposal is made up of the draft withdrawal agreement on how we leave the EU and a political declaration forming a basis for our future relationship with the European Union. That declaration isn't legally binding, but it says Brexit will end the free movement of EU citizens who want to come and live in the UK, but that also applies to British citizens wanting to move to the EU. On the issue of the Irish border, which is proving deeply contentious, the declaration adds only that new technology can be explored to try to ensure there is no need to use what's called the Irish backstop. That would keep Northern Ireland closer to EU rules. It says the UK will be allowed to pursue an independent trade policy with other countries, but the European Court of Justice will still play a role in UK affairs, something which has angered many Brexit supporters. Well, live to Brussels now, and our correspondent Gavin Lee. In a sense, Gavin, that indicates the difficulties that lie ahead, even if Britain gets past this summit and gets the withdrawal agreement through the House of Commons. It's just the prelude to more talks, and talks that are likely to be much tougher.
Yeah, there's 4 stages to it. If the summit happens tomorrow, the special summit on Brexit, they will agree to the divorce deal. So the legal withdrawal agreement, 585 pages, and the non-legal text, but the blueprint for the future, the political declaration. That gets endorsed and agreed, and then that goes on to British Parliament. That has to be ratified, then to the European Parliament to be ratified, and then back to the EU to be voted on by leaders. But this is seen as the key stage tomorrow. In fact, this time tomorrow, if all goes according to plan, then the thing will be signed off. Many see it, in fact the Belgian newspaper Le Soir calling it the final curtain of Act 1 for Brexit, the divorce almost going through, of course, for Westminster. But there are still hurdles here. I mean, for Theresa May's team, they have to stiffen the sinews and summon up the blood here, because it is almost like a last-minute fight between their officials and the Spanish and EU officials to try to work out how to placate Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, who says that from all the texts, Spain still hasn't got enough of reassurance that they will have a say directly with the UK on the future of Gibraltar, which they still contend as not being a British overseas territory. Now, we've heard that the Gibraltar Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, who was due to go and speak at the DUP conference, his team say he's back in Gibraltar. He's cancelled that. He realises he has to be there to focus and help do what he can to try to break the impasse with Spain. And those talks are going on now between officials ahead of Theresa May arriving here in a few hours to meet the EU top team of Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Tusk ahead of tomorrow's supposed, we think, summit.
Gavin, just on that, why is the expectation that Spain could have derailed this, given that we're told that it's, the withdrawal agreement can go through with a kind of weighted majority of countries voting? It doesn't have to have everybody voting for it.
No, but Spain can veto. I think Pedro Sanchez has been clever with his language, effectively because they've convened a special summit. So far, for 17 months of talks, there's been complete unanimity amongst countries, despite recent quabbles about fish, with some countries want fishing rights in UK waters, that to be spelt out in the political declaration. With Spain, the European EU officials are saying you cannot have one member state not arriving for this special summit. They would have to call it off. That is the plain truth of this. But it's political brinkmanship. There are also elections in Andalusia, the region in a few weeks' time which borders with Gibraltar. There are 10,000 people who are Spanish workers in La Linea that work across in Gibraltar, and Pedro Sanchez has been accused by the opposition PP party in Spain of being too soft on Brexit. Weigh up the two. Well, does 2 and 2 equal 4 or 5 on this one? It's not clear. It is worth saying, though, suddenly this dramatic language. But EU officials here believe there can be a breakthrough by this evening.
Gavin Lee in Brussels, thank you. Well, as we heard a little earlier, the DUP leader Arlene Foster is expected to reiterate her opposition to the proposed Brexit deal when she addresses its annual conference later this afternoon. Our correspondent Chris Page is at the event in Belfast.
Well, there's quite an atmosphere here at the DUP conference in Belfast. Never really has there been as much national interest on what happens at a Democratic Unionist Party conference, because after all, this is the party which is at the parliamentary pivot point. It has a deal with the Conservatives to support Theresa May's minority government in key votes, though that arrangement has been under increasing strain in recent days because the DUP are not at all happy with the draft Brexit deal. As you say, Sean, they feel that the arrangements for what's called the border backstop would leave Northern Ireland potentially under the control of the EU when it comes to rules on goods. They say that would be a breach of Northern Ireland's sovereignty within the UK, and it would damage the Union. So these are high stakes for Unionists. Last night we had the Chancellor Philip Hammond coming here trying to sell the Prime Minister's deal, but I'd expect Boris Johnson will probably get a better reception from the party members whenever he comes to speak here this afternoon. So questions are now being asked: how stable is the confidence and supply agreement? Will the DUP go further than just voting against the Brexit deal when it comes before the House of Commons? Could they be prepared to pull down the government altogether? Well, just listen to this from Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, the DUP's chief whip, who's been speaking to the BBC's this morning.
Here in Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionist Party isn't put off by the notion that we would fight an election on the basis that we want the best deal for the Union, the best deal for the United Kingdom and the best deal for our economy. And this, at the moment, doesn't represent what we believe is the best deal.
So Sir Geoffrey Donaldson making it clear the DUP wouldn't be afraid of a general election if that's what all this political tumult eventually resulted in. The DUP looking further afield than Westminster at this conference, though they've had strong links for a number of years with the government of Gibraltar. I suppose they see themselves in the same camp in terms of their unionism. They want to retain the link with the UK. That's at the heart of their politics. It's different to anywhere else in the UK. And so today we've heard from a minister in the Gibraltarian government, Samantha Sacramento, who's the Minister for Housing and Equality. She's come here to the conference to speak, and she too had a very uncompromising message when it comes to the current debate over the future of Gibraltar in the context of these Brexit negotiations.
It is critical that the United Kingdom remains firm in the defence of our right to self-determination and that Spain is given no hope, absolutely no hope, in its campaign to take our sovereignty from us.
So that issue of Gibraltar to the fore again this weekend, with Spain saying it wants more of a say over Gibraltar in the talks between Britain and the EU when it comes to the future relationship after Britain exits the EU in March 2019. As far as the Democratic Unionist Party here in Belfast are concerned, they say the reason why they have propped up the government was to deliver Brexit. Remember, the DUP, passionate Brexiteers, the only main party in Northern Ireland who campaigned for the UK to leave the European Union, and they say that if the confidence and supply deal with the Tories doesn't deliver Brexit, well, they will revisit it. So I think you can expect to hear a very strong message from Arlene Foster this afternoon that the DUP is resolutely opposed to the draft Brexit deal, and she's going to tell the Prime Minister, go back and get a better agreement.
That's Chris Page at the DUP conference in Belfast. Let's cross to Paris now. These are the latest pictures. The scene live in central Paris, close to the Champs-Élysées, where protesters had gathered and were attempting to break through a police cordon when the police began using tear gas. We've also seen water cannon deployed in the last hour or so, but the protesters remain, albeit not in large numbers at this stage. They're known as the Gilets Jaunes protesters because of the yellow tabards they're wearing. By law in France you have to carry one of those if you're a motorist or drive some other vehicle because of the risk of breakdown, that you should be visible, so that's a kind of safety thing, but they've adopted it as a kind of emblem of this campaign against fuel tax fuel tax increases rather, which President Macron is determined to introduce, and which many drivers are extremely angry about. That anger has translated itself into protests across France over the last week or so. Some of those protests have been pretty lively. There was an incident yesterday near Angers where a man had actually effectively barricaded himself in, was demanding that President Macron should meet the protesters. Eventually he was persuaded to come out again. But the anger and the political pressure on the president has increased and is increasing, and of course these protests, and if there are violent scenes on the streets of Paris, then that will clearly have an impact as well on the political debate over whether or not these tax rises on fuel are justified. That's the scene in Paris this lunchtime. Here, police are questioning a man after an officer was stabbed outside a railway station in London. British Transport Police said the male officer was attacked with a knife outside Ilford railway station. A man was arrested soon after. The police officer has been treated in hospital, but his injuries are not thought to be life-threatening. The White House has dismissed a hard-hitting official report on climate change, which warns of its impact on the US economy and society. The report was written with the help of more than a dozen US government agencies and says the size of the US economy will shrink by 10% by the end of this century if no action is taken. The report clashes with President Trump's own policies on the issue. He's repeatedly cast doubt on the fact of man-made climate change and argued it isn't real. Our correspondent James Cook has more.
This, say many scientists, is what climate change looks like. In recent years, California has seen bigger, deadlier and more destructive wildfires than ever before. During a cold snap in Washington this week, President Trump tweeted, "Whatever happened to global warming?" Now, his own government experts have answered the question. It's here, they say. Its effects are serious, and without dramatic change, they will be catastrophic. Already, says the report, more frequent and intense storms like Hurricane Harvey, which ravaged Houston in Texas, are destroying property and may damage critical infrastructure such as bridges, power plants and oil refineries. Crop yields and labour productivity will decline. There will be a rise in the spread of tropical disease. The poorest Americans will be hardest hit.
One of the things that's quite striking about the report, for example, is that we could see a future where the southeastern parts of the United States experience forest fire seasons that look like what happens in the West right now. And the real harm of a forest fire is not just the conflagration, it's how people, whether they know how to respond to them. They know how to respond to them if they've been through these seasons again and again and again. That's something that people in the Southeast haven't experienced before, so we know that it could potentially have even greater impact.
The scientists say substantial and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions are essential, and they do report some progress. But President Trump has taken a sharply different approach to his predecessor Barack Obama, championing coal, oil and gas and rolling back environmental regulations. Without major urgent action, says the report, the impacts of climate change will soon cascade into every corner of American life. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Hundreds of environmental activists have taken part in a demonstration in Parliament Square in Westminster this morning. As part of an event organised by the group Extinction Rebellion, protesters were urged to wear funeral clothing and bring wreaths to symbolise what campaigners see as the threat to the planet's future. Demonstrations are also taking place at the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, as well as in Manchester, North Wales and Sheffield. The destruction of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil has reached its highest level in a decade, driven by illegal logging and the planting of crops. Satellite images show that 3,000 square miles of forest was cleared in the year to July, up nearly 14% on the previous year. Environmentalists say deforestation is one of the main causes of global warming. Right, let's take a look at the headlines on BBC News now at 17 minutes past midday. Theresa May is set to head to Brussels for talks later this afternoon with top EU officials ahead of Sunday's crucial summit, formally signing off on the Brexit deal. French police have used water cannon and tear gas to disperse protesters gathering in central Paris, demanding a cut in the price of fuel. The White House has dismissed a government report that warns unchecked climate change will seriously damage the economy and affect human health and the quality of life. The National Crime Agency issues a warning to organised gangs involved in people smuggling across the English Channel. I'll be speaking to the NCA's operational lead on how they're tackling the problem. Now, more on those crucial talks in Brussels taking place across the weekend. Theresa May is heading there in the next few hours. Let's speak to Jacopo Barigazzi. Forgive me, Jacopo. He's the Brussels reporter for the online political magazine. Hello, good to speak to you again. What do you make of the prospects of this summit going ahead, Jacopo? Is it going to happen?
Listen, on paper it shouldn't be difficult because the request of Madrid as now is not anymore to reopen the withdrawal agreement, which would have been like opening a Pandora box, but just to have a sideline declaration. And so it's on paper this will make things much easier, but it's the more time the later it gets, obviously the more complicated it becomes. At the same time, we know we've been seeing it not just on this on the Brexit talks, but also in other crises involving here the EU, that often deals are reached at the very last minute. It's also true that Madrid's power of veto, it does actually exist, because it's at the Council of Ministers. Madrid veto can be overcome because the vote is with majority. But at the European Council, which is the format that will take place tomorrow, unanimity is required. It's called consensus, but consensus means unanimity. And so without Spain on board, then no European Council tomorrow.
That's an alarming prospect for Theresa May as she prepares to cross the Channel. Even if, though, she gets the summit and the EU leaders are true to their word and sign off on the withdrawal agreement, she's got tougher battles ahead, hasn't she? I mean, this will have seemed bad enough for the British negotiators, but I guess they ain't seen nothing yet when you compare what's happened now with what's like to happen when they start talking about a trade relationship for life after Brexit.
Exactly. I mean, here the mood is not a mood to. The mood is not that the EU, Brussels, wants to celebrate this deal. First of all, because of the fact that anyway Brexit, meaning the UK leaving, is not something that it's in itself something enjoyable by the EU. Then also because this deal is not granted, nobody can be sure of what will happen there at Westminster. Here, diplomats were pretty concerned that today's visit of May could have been the occasion to actually reopen one of the texts, but meaning the withdrawal agreement or the political declaration. But then the Commission has reassured them that is not going to be the case. So it's pretty unclear what exactly May is the reason why exactly she is coming here. But anyway, what is very important is that the text is stable, is not going to change, and whatever is the purpose of the visit, is not to reopen them. Then there is the issue of the fact that only after, will be clear whether the British Parliament, whether Westminster will approve the deal. Only after that we will start knowing more about the future, meaning, for example, who will be in charge of leading the negotiations with Brussels for the FTA, for the free trade agreement.
And when you look at the prospects of resolution, how long do you think this process could actually take?
That's a very good question, because here there was a joke already months ago that transition would have lasted so long that the headline for our stories would have become "Lost in Transition." But now at least we know that there is a limit for how long a transition can be extended. Then some are pretty confident that the time will be enough to actually reach a free trade agreement, because it's a free trade agreement. Their reasoning is that a free trade agreement with a country whose regulation is already so much in line with the regulation of the EU, it shouldn't be as difficult and complicated as a trade agreement with Canada, New Zealand, or countries that have regulations very different from the regulation of the EU.
Jacopo Barragasi, the Politico correspondent in Brussels, thank you very much for being with us on BBC News this lunchtime. Hundreds of people have attended the funeral of the well-known Syrian radio host and activist Riyad Fares, who was killed by gunmen in the rebel-held province of Idlib yesterday. Riyad Fares founded an independent radio station broadcasting from opposition-held areas. Despite several assassination attempts, he refused to leave Idlib and continued to defy both the government and militant groups. When his station, Fresh Radio, was ordered to remove its female presenters, software was used to disguise their voices. Tributes to Fares have been paid from across the world. UN envoy to Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has delivered an impassioned plea for peace in the embattled city of Hodeidah, which is held by the Houthi rebels. A government offensive has jeopardised the operation of the port, a vital lifeline for aid. On a visit to the area, Mr Griffiths pressed for the UN to be given a leading role in running it. Caroline Rigby has more.
From bombs and bullets to malnutrition and disease. Described by the UN as the world's worst man-made humanitarian crisis, this conflict has left a nation on the verge of famine.
Half of children, 47%, so approximately half of all children are chronically malnourished. Health facilities functioning are approximately only 50% versus 90% in 2013. 1/5 of the districts have no doctors anymore.
In recent weeks, fighting in Yemen has focused on the rebel-held city of Hodeidah as government forces try to seize the area from Houthi rebels. But Hodeidah's harbour acts as a vital lifeline in this devastating war, and this recent offensive has threatened the arrival of food aid for millions of people in Yemen already close to starvation. Visiting the city on Friday, the United Nations envoy Martin Griffiths described Hodeidah as the centre of gravity in this conflict and called for the UN to take a leading role in running the port.
It needs to be done quickly by discussing it with all the parties, and we believe that such a role will preserve the essential humanitarian pipeline that starts here and serves the people of Yemen.
War has raged in Yemen for 3.5 years between the Saudi-led military coalition and Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. International efforts to bring to an end the conflict were once again dashed this week when yet more fierce fighting flared up. But both sides do now appear open, at least, to the possibility of further peace talks, which the UN hopes can resume in Sweden in December. Caroline Rigby, BBC News.
The National Crime Agency has issued a warning to organised gangs, which it says are behind a recent spike in illegal attempts to cross the English Channel. This morning, the French authorities picked up 5 migrants from a small boat just off the coast, southwest of Calais. On Friday, 8 Iranians were brought ashore after their dinghy was spotted off the coast of Kent. It brings the total number of suspected migrants to have reached the UK this month to 101. Well, joining us now via webcam is Chris Hogburn of the National Crime Agency's operational lead for tackling people smuggling. Chris, welcome to BBC News. Thanks for speaking to us this lunchtime. What's the explanation for these numbers?
Well, firstly, I don't want to get tied into numbers of individual sort of migrants. Our role is really to tackle the crime groups that are behind this. You are right, we've seen a real spike in the numbers of attempts across the Channel by small boats and ribs involving almost exclusively Iranian migrants since the beginning of October. We're now working with our UK law enforcement colleagues and also with the French law enforcement to try to identify the crime groups behind it and, of course, to bring them to justice, ultimately stopping the attempts. I would just say, though, that this is nothing new. We have seen attempts using small boats and ribs on and off over the last 2 or 3 years. What's really changed is the intensity in terms of the numbers. You know, we have seen a real spike in this since the beginning of October.
Is that spike likely to reduce again because of the weather conditions, if nothing else changes at least?
Yeah, this week we've generally seen fairly calm weather, which obviously makes it easier, I guess, for people to try these attempts. What I would say is this is a really dangerous method of trying to enter the UK. One of the downsides, to a certain extent, some might say, with the tightened security around the UK border is the fact that it makes the criminals and the migrants far more desperate, if you like, in terms of the measures that they will go to try to beat that security. And one of the things that we see is the increase in this type of activity. Now, we're talking about people using small boats and ribs to cross the English Channel, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, invariably at night, invariably with a helmsman who's got very little, if any, experience. And of course, we're also talking about a small boat or rib that we'd probably class as overloaded. And on almost every occasion, the migrants themselves don't have any form of safety equipment. So we're talking about a very dangerous method. And when you look upstream at the Mediterranean region, so the Central Med, the Eastern Med and the Western Med routes, you know, we've seen a number of tragedies over the last 3 years where people have lost their lives there. And it's probably very...
Rails. The Californian wildfires are the deadliest the state has ever seen. They've claimed the lives of more than 80 people, hundreds are missing, and whole towns have been destroyed. But as residents tried to escape, the firefighters did what they always do. They ran towards the danger. It's a profession that relies on courage, education and increasingly the latest science and technology to better understand how fires behave and how to beat back the flames. And if you want to be a firefighter, this is where you learn your craft. The International Fire Training Centre in Darlington, in the north of England. This is where brave firefighters come from around the world to learn the latest techniques in fighting all kinds of blazes.
They can simulate a huge variety of fire scenarios here: oil rigs, industrial fires, that's an overturned fuel tanker, and they can simulate any size of aircraft from the smallest to the largest. That is an Airbus A380 and this is a Boeing 747.
And it's not just about gearing up and grabbing the hose. Every fire is different and each needs to be treated intelligently to make sure you and the people to save have the best chance of survival.
Wow. Oh my goodness. We're using the water as a protective shield. So we're keeping the two fires apart, using the water. Keeping the left-hand one at bay and then extinguishing the right one before we deal with the left.
The centre tries to make each scenario as realistic as possible, not just the fire, but the treatment of the casualties too. It's fascinating to see the science behind firefighting. For example, in a kerosene fuel fire, water won't put it out. This cone of water controls the blaze so that another firefighter can come in with a powder extinguisher. That is what finally tames the flames. And once they're gone, does that mean the job is done? Well, that's where this thermal imaging camera comes in, to see what our eyes can't.
So once it looks like the fire's out, you still have to cover the area in water, just in case there are some hot spots. You can see here the vent and the top of this engine is still white hot according to this thermal imaging camera. And there are many other ways to detect and deal with fires, and Lara Lewington has been looking at some of them.
For the past 2 years, half of the UK's fire brigades have been deploying these drones. They focus on the safety of firefighters, and their onboard HD and thermal imaging cameras can provide much greater visibility, which means a better understanding of a fire and the way that it's spreading.
Using a drone, we can get pretty much an instant overview of a whole fire in sort of less than 5 minutes, and start moving our machines and our firefighters around just like chess pieces, really, all controlled by sort of your drone footage. It also brings us a massive benefit as we can see fires as they're developing.
The team here have also used them for rescues and searching for missing people in quarries or in water. The HD camera being able to clearly zoom in on a face up to half a mile away. But of course, when it comes to the spread of fires, what's happened recently in California is at the forefront of our minds.
Well, the University of Westminster is researching a system that combines sensors on the ground and those in a drone. The aim, a solution for wildfires.
These solar-powered prototype sensors are tracking carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, oxygen, humidity, temperature, GPS and altitude. The aim is to combine them into one miniaturized, cost-effective version, which could be deployed en masse in areas susceptible to wildfires, providing immediate feedback.
If there is something, they will alert all their neighbors also, form into a network, alert, take measurements, convey it to the master node, which then conveys it further up to the server, which then alerts the drones that come up to get a visual. The plane comes with all the information that it has got from the drones, from the ground sensors, and it knows what the wind speed is, what the wind direction is, what the temperature variations are. It comes over the fire, it knows where the fire is going to be when the plane rendezvous with that, and then it makes a release from the air, and then you've got the heavens opening with these lovely pellets flying in and hitting the target where the fire is. And you can fight fires day and night, 24 hours a day, with no visibility.
Meanwhile, this is the Stinger. It
can pierce through metal and pretty much any roof, dramatically blasting foam or water into the heart of a blaze.
The quantity and force of that water is pretty incredible.
This pumps 1,000 litres a minute, with an even more powerful jet to the side, capable of 4.5 times that. It also has an onboard thermal imaging camera to assist with that precision. Blackburn is currently the only UK fire service using this kit though. I'm told it costs around £600,000. But maybe as costs come down and all of this technology evolves, this next generation of firefighting will become the norm.
That was Lara. And back at the International Fire Training Centre, I'm about to be shut inside a mock Boeing 747. See, when it comes to fire, sometimes it's not the one right in front of you that's the most dangerous. It's the one that's waiting to ignite.
This is to demonstrate what happens when flammable vapours up high reach an ignition source. It's called a flashover, and it looks like this. I tell you, just that tiny bit of fire in this enclosed environment really shows that smoke is the real killer. My goodness, you can hardly breathe, it's stinging my eyes. They use so much water here every year that it would be silly if they didn't try and reuse it. So that's exactly what they do. All the water, the kerosene, the foam, the powder and the general sludge from the site flow into a drainage system that goes underground and ends up first of all in a small lagoon over here where the kerosene floats to the top and is skimmed off, and they can actually reuse it. It will burn again. The rest of the liquid ends up in the next lagoon where the solids settle. And then all you're left with is this watery foamy mix which gets pumped to the reed beds over there. Now the foam is made of animal protein which the reeds actually feed on. So they effectively suck the foam out of the liquid. So all you're left with at the end of the day is relatively clean water.
And we'll have more from this place soon.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. It was the week that the price of Bitcoin hit lows not seen since 2017, leading to speculation on the cryptocurrency's future value. Uber announced it would make accessible cars available in 15 minutes or less to wheelchair users in 6 major cities after facing criticism of long wait times and limited availability. And Star Wars actor Mark Hamill teamed up with tech company Open Bionics to send a positive message to kids around the world living with limb differences.
Remember, Luke lost his hand to Vader, but that didn't stop him from defeating the Empire.
It was also the week that NASA finally decided where it's going to land its 2020 Mars rover. They hope it holds the clue to ancient life on the planet. Meanwhile, NASA also launched a workplace safety review into SpaceX and Boeing. The two companies are contracted to fly astronauts to the International Space Station, possibly as early as 2019. Sources close to the investigation say it comes after SpaceX founder Elon Musk was seen puffing marijuana on a podcast in September. And finally, you can never have enough Star Wars in the news. Forget the forest moon of Endor. Devon, England is where a local man has installed a 4.5-metre replica of the AT-ST Imperial Walker by a roadside, where he hoped it would become a tourist attraction. The local council weren't impressed and have ordered him to take it down.
As well as the practical firefighting that happens here at the International Fire Training Centre, there's plenty of theory to be learned about the unusual ways that fire can behave.
Now, a real danger to firefighters is when a fire in a sealed room starves itself of oxygen, so it looks like the fire has gone out, but the whole place is still really, really hot. Then if a firefighter opens a door to come in, oxygen rolls in
and starts to mix with the gases. They become flammable again, and that's when you get a backdraft. So, wouldn't it be good if firefighters could use technology to see what they're getting themselves into? And that's what Paul Carter has been looking at in Switzerland.
For firefighters, it's often the things they can't see that are the most dangerous. The helmet I'm wearing has a thermal imaging camera fitted to the side. What's unique is that it incorporates a small Google Glass style heads-up display. It's visible over one eye, giving firefighters thermal imaging without obscuring their normal vision.
So I'm going to use it going into this very smoky room and see what I can see. Luckily it's not too smoky in here at the minute and I can actually still see it, but once this smoke actually really starts to get up, as strange as it may sound, my view of that fire is going to completely disappear.
In a modern building, there's a lot of synthetic materials. Buildings are more closed than ever. There's less holes next to windows and things like that. So there's a lot of smoke development, and fire may actually be hidden behind smoke. Or there may be people on the floor that you don't see. Or the thickness of the smoke is a real issue for firefighters. You always have access to the thermal image, which starts adding some additional advantages then, is that you would also use the thermal camera where before it wasn't possible. Like when you're working with a fire hose, you can suddenly see as well if you're aiming right, for example.
But just as firefighters protect us, keeping them protected is also critical. And nothing is more important than the clothing they wear.
And one of the biggest issues with firefighters right now is that their gear prevents them from evacuating their own body heat. So lots of developments actually go in the direction of preventing heat stress for firefighters.
Making their uniforms fireproof and heat resistant is a no-brainer, but doing so while making it flexible, breathable and light is a whole different challenge. At the DuPont European Technical Centre in Geneva, they've developed a material that can withstand extremely high temperatures. It's made of a material that bubbles when exposed to high heat, insulating the wearer.
It has been proven that if your body temperature, the core temperature, raises above a certain level, you start doing the wrong decisions. It affects your brain function, and that's exactly what you do not want to have happen for a firefighter. Eventually, he would not realize when he is in extreme danger, or he would realize it too late.
You can feel how raised the surface is. These bubbles, for want of a better word, have kind of lifted off the fabric compared to the bit that hasn't been exposed to the fire.
Naturally, these fabrics have to be vigorously tested and certified, and in the centre's own lab, they conduct a variety of burning tests to ensure the materials are robust. As a comparison, I looked at what happens when the same tests are conducted on regular cotton. The result was rather terrifying.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's completely on fire. Yes. It's burnt through.
They've also developed a smart heat-sensing glove that firefighters can use to detect the temperature of a surface or doors to help protect against backdrafts. Now, Switzerland may not be the first place that comes to mind when you think of fire. But it's surprisingly advanced when it comes to firefighting tech. For example, it's the only country in Europe to have a firefighting train.
The cabin's actually pressurised, so in the event of a fire, this can be operated as a safe breathing environment.
This bad boy is one of 16 in use across the country, and it's an absolute beast. It can be used for a wide variety of tasks, Only some of them specifically related to firefighting. It can be used as a rescue vehicle for people or other trains. It can pick up derailed trains, and it can also simply be used to transport fire crews more quickly and directly than by road. But let's be honest, fighting fires is the coolest thing this train can do. It holds 43,000 litres of water and 1,000 litres of special firefighting foam. Also, a foam cannon. It can also create a curtain of protection, a mist of water that blankets around the train, providing a protective area from smoke and chemicals.
So far at the International Training Centre, I've been learning how to physically deal with fires. But in large disasters, the coordinators are the ones who need to see the bigger picture and try and control the entire scenario.
Looks like the passengers are already evacuating, so can we get a fire appliance to start extinguishing the fire over there? We really need to stop that fire from getting to the main body of the plane. This simulator allows me to take the role of incident commander. I've got crew commanders sat at each of these workstations. They're in charge of each fire appliance. My job is to make assessments and then call commands to them to try and deal with this fire, which already looks quite serious, I have to say.
So the undercarriage is on fire.
Is the undercarriage on fire?
On fire, undercarriage on the port side, that's on fire.
Oh! Oh, wow. That was an explosion. Something tells me this plane's not going to be flying again anytime soon. So as well as being the incident commander, you can swap roles and become a nurse or a paramedic or a police officer as well. I can see how this can be a really intense experience, even though it is just a simulation, but you really have to have your wits about you to make sense of a very rapidly developing situation.
Now, this is not the only kind of simulation used by first responders. Kat Hawkins has been looking at how virtual reality is being used to assess the aftermath of an emergency.
I'm at Leicestershire Fire and Rescue, the first service in the country to invest in virtual reality. Their hope is that money will be saved by replacing some of the expensive traditional training techniques with VR alternatives.
I've seen the demo and the fire looks quite intense, so I don't think it's going to be what I'm used to when it comes to virtual reality, which is just having a nice time. Let's see.
All the scenes in the training are scanned from the real world. For instance, this arson hotspot in Leicester is a good reference for investigators looking for clues.
It's the inside of a destroyed smoke alarm. I just need to say, like, the environment is like I'm standing on ash. It feels very real. Teleportation. Oh my gosh, okay, there's a body down there.
If you enjoy your training, you're going to get more out of it. It's already been proven, there's a study in the United States, that if you train in the virtual reality environment, the retention rate is 75%. Most of my talks I do on road safety are PowerPoint, retention rate 5%. You know, so you can see why we're looking at this, because our training is going to be enhanced so much.
And if you want to skip 10 seconds forward, you can do it on a controller. You can just skip forward, and so you can fast forward the fire. You remember from the scene you saw a minute ago, that TV monitor was completely melted.
You can see how it physically affects things that it's not even burning yet.
Yes. Then the idea is, obviously, as this stops, we didn't show the people putting out the fire, but you get the ability to dive back in the scene, and now you're in that same burn scene.
Yeah, seeing the impact of that fire is pretty remarkable. It moves quickly.
It's an immersive experience, and the ability to, hold objects, to photograph them, to mark them. We don't often see the initial development of a fire, and so you know, for fire behaviour and how a fire developed in a fire scene. It's useful from that angle as well, really. You know, from a forensic perspective and training of new people in this field, I think it will be invaluable.
Part of the reason this experience feels so intense is the realism behind it. For Leicestershire Fire and Rescue, this was important, that they move away from gamification and into real life. They've been working with a company called River to make this happen. The scenes are created using photogrammetry, both cameras and lasers photographing real-life 360-degree scenarios up to thousands of times.
We've seen how fire services are using virtual reality, but what about other first responders? Here at the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, they're hard at work on how police might use virtual reality in their training.
Number 7 Ferguson House. Caller reports sounds of a violent disturbance.
Oh,
Female
wow.
screaming.
I can see some feet already.
So I don't think that people would expect to put the police and virtual reality together. Why is it so important that the police are interacting with technology in this way?
You can replicate one-off events, so a one-off event which could be a dangerous or hazardous environment, you can actually recreate as a one-off, and people would never ever get the opportunity to rehearse that, but in VR we can, so we can give them that vehicle, we can give them that opportunity to do a one-off scenario and do it safely.
Here we go. Oh my gosh! Okay, I'm going to see if this woman is alive. She's obviously taken some pills. There's a heartbeat here.
I can definitely see already how it could be used to, in the way that a lot of games are really, to open up your mind to possibilities around crime, why people may have committed criminal activities. Those kind of questions are definitely there already. Yeah. That was more enjoyable than the fire one, I think, which perhaps shouldn't be my takeaway, but I am like, oh, I could go back into that world, whereas the fire scene, I just wanted to get out.
And that's it from the International Fire Training Centre. Hope you found it as fascinating as we have. We're going to put a load more footage and photos from this place up on social media. Don't forget we live on Facebook and on Twitter at BBC Click. But for now, thanks for watching and we'll see you soon.